With the NFL draft inching closer, what are some of the key storylines to look forward to? Starting at the top, all signs point towards the Jaguars taking Aiden Hutchinson first overall. But it's still possible they address the offensive line, a unit they need to upgrade to protect Trevor Lawrence, who got hit far too often as a rookie.
I still think Evan Neal could be in play if you decide you want to go all in on the offensive line and maybe make him a right tackle or play him at guard for a year.
As far as the quarterbacks go, Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett are projected to be the first signal callers selected. And while this may not be the most touted quarterback class overall, with so many teams needing to address that position, who might make a move up the board to take one?
I don't think there's any guy that really lights it up. There's no surefire number one overall pick. But if you're going to invest this type of draft capital and financial commitment to a quarterback, I want to see big return.
Speaking of teams who could make draft day deals, there are 8 teams in possession of multiple first-round picks, starting with the Jets and Giants, who both have 2 in the top 10. The Packers and Chiefs are among the 8 teams with 2 first-rounders, and both appear to have a need at wide receiver. And while this is another loaded class at wideout, will either team have to trade up to get their desired target?
For the love of God, please get Aaron Rodgers some help.
The wait is almost over. Whose stock is rising and who might be in for a draft day slide? Questions will turn into answers April 28th in Sin City.
All right, here are the odds to go number 1. I mentioned a shift. Travon Walker is now the favorite at minus 200. Aiden Hutchinson, who had been the favorite for a long time, is plus 140. And then a big drop-off down to a couple of offensive linemen in Ike Ekwonu and Evan Neal, who a couple of our experts think have a really good chance to go number 1. Like you heard Pete Prisco saying, Ryan Wilson has been on those guys as well. Speaking of Ryan Wilson, let's get him in here along with Todd Fuhrman and John Berger, and we're going to get some winning picks from the guys. Let's start with the first overall pick. And Todd, since you are our bookkeeper and our line setter, what's going on with Travon Walker, now the favorite at minus 200?
You know, honestly, Chris, this has been a tremendous story to watch since draft markets were posted months ago, because during the course of the season, Kayvon Thibodeau, a lot of people thought, was a formality to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Obviously, his combine and questions about his commitment to football soured a little bit, and we've seen those numbers drop. Travon Walker was a guy that professional bettors gravitated towards at a price of 20-1 about 8 weeks ago to be the number 1 pick in the draft, thinking the tantalizing potential might be attractive to the Jacksonville Jaguars, thinking that they could go in an unorthodox direction. But it wasn't until last night and early this morning, to your point, that we've seen a complete shift where Walker has moved to the odds-on favorite at minus $2. And for the first time in the last 6 weeks, Aiden Hutchinson you can find at a price better than even money. A lot of that is because certain high-profile mock drafts get out there. There's changing buzz. And while I was originally inclined to bet the field against Aiden Hutchinson at the price that was available at Caesars at plus $1.10 last night, I almost think Aiden Hutchinson offers a little bit of value at this juncture at plus 145, but a lot's going to change between now and draft night on Thursday.
Ryan, what do you think when you look at the odds now? Who would you put your money on to go number 1 overall after all these mock drafts you've done?
Yeah, it's Groundhog Day, Chris. I tell you that all the time. But, this is the issue here. 14 hours ago, it was plus money for Travon Walker going first overall, and I sort of like that there. And I think the issue is this. What does Trent Baalke, the general manager, want to do? The word on the street, the reports and the rumors that you hear is that he loves Travon Walker. It reminds him in some sense of Aldon Smith, who he drafted back when they were with the San Francisco 49ers. Shad Khan, the owner, likes Aiden Hutchinson, who feels like the safer pick, as we've been talking about it here. But I think Travon Walker might win out in terms of the battle of what Trent Baalke wants. Something else worth noting, by the way, when he took Aldon Smith, who had a fantastic rookie season as a part-time rusher, he also passed on, Trent Baalke did, some guy named J.J. Watt and Cam Jordan, 2 guys that are going to go to the Hall of Fame. So Aldon Smith makes sense in terms of the traits and the measurables, just like Travon Walker does. First overall, feels sort of rich. Aldon Smith certainly didn't go that high. And I've been telling you for weeks and months, Chris, I feel like offensive tackle feels the biggest need for the Jaguars because their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, took a ton of hits last year. And if you want to protect him, you don't keep drafting edge rushers, which they've done in 2 of the last 3 drafts with that first-round pick. But it feels like that's the direction we're going, and it feels like Travon Walker, who is now minus money 14 hours later, is going to be that guy.
You know what, Ryan? The other thing that I'll say on this pick, first of all, put a small amount of money, but in the intro that Chris gave Fuhrman, if you truly are setting the lines after this set, pick up your phone because I'm going to need you to adjust a few of them for the following picks. Look, guys, don't overcomplicate this one. With Trayvon Walker moving up and down, and you mentioned, or Todd mentioned that the odds several weeks ago or several months ago, I don't think this is a bet you put a bunch of money on. I think Walker is the safe bet. A lot of people are just looking at his stats, and everybody knows he's 275. He runs the 4.5, but the thing you need to factor in when you place a bet like this is there's three things that happen in the NFL draft. You have to deal with momentum, which you're seeing Walker pick up momentum. You have to deal with the disinformation campaign that every team is very good at doing, and you have to deal with the shiny objects syndrome. So with those three things in mind, with the odds shifting around, I don't think the Jags can't go wrong in this spot. I just think Walker's the safest pick. I understand. Played 36 games, only had 9 sacks. Everybody's piling on the negatives and the weaknesses, and that's where they point. I just think in this situation, place a small bet, put it on Walker. This guy may not have the numbers in terms of sacks, but when you look at him on tape, I'm not sure there's a better player in America in terms of creating chaos and clutter in the pocket, and that's, you get a premium for that in the NFL.
John Berger saying where there's smoke, there's fire. The odds shifting in Walker's favor, and he's going at it at -200 to be the #1 overall pick. How about some plus money value, John? What's a top 5 value pick for you?
I think there's 2 of them. I think Garrett Wilson at the wide receiver position and Jameson Williams as well. I think when you look at Wilson, everybody was kind of comparing him to the various wide receivers, including his teammate Chris Olave. I just think this situation is worth the bet. And the reason that I say that is a couple of skills, besides the obvious and that you see at the combine and his straight line speed and all the thing and the vertical jump, which he stacks up as good or better than anybody in the draft right now. If you look at him on tape, there's a couple of skills that really jump out in terms of being differentiated. And one of those is contested catches. And I don't mean contested catches inside of a box of 15 yards. I'm talking about contested catches downfield and explosive chunk plays. And I'm not sure there's a better wide receiver in the draft right now being able to create those contested catches downfield on those biggest chunk plays. And I just think he creates a unique differentiator at this spot. On top of that, because he's healthy, I don't think that this is a place where you back away from. I would put more money on this. I think plus money on Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver. I could totally see somebody jumping up in that spot and picking him inside the first 5 rounds. 5 picks, that is.
No, I love it, John. And one of those teams could be the New York Jets, who pick 4th and they pick again 10th. And the conversation has been maybe they go edge rusher there at 4 if Kayvon Thibodeau's still there, for example. Or maybe they take Garrett Wilson at 4 because they don't think he's going to be there at 10. There are teams that need wide receivers sitting there at 8. The Atlanta Falcons, desperate need of just about every position except tight end. Garrett Wilson is probably the top of their list. But I think if you're Robert Saleh going into year 2, if you have Zach Wilson, who struggled mightily last year, and fingers crossed Mekhi Becton can come back as your left tackle, you have to put players around Zach Wilson to succeed. And for all the reasons you laid out is the reason why Garrett Wilson is my wide receiver 1. Yes, he and Chris Olave were on the same field together. Yes, they ran similar times at the combine. One plays much faster than the other, and that's Garrett Wilson. That's to take nothing away from Chris Olave. In a lot of ways, Garrett Wilson reminds me of Odell Beckham at his best. Garrett Wilson compared himself to Deontay Johnson. I think that's a great comp, too. Either one of those players you're getting, if you're New York Jets, I think you feel great about it inside the top 5. And even if you have to get him at 4, circle back at 10 and get that edge rusher there, whether it's Jermaine Johnson or someone else, that might be the best path for sooner success rather than later for that offense with Zach Wilson going into his 2nd season.
You guys can chase the big shiny object out there, the difference maker on the edge, and Garrett Wilson, his potential for big plays. I'm going to focus on the trenches here and make a case for Charles Cross being a top 5 pick at a price of 7-1. You look at him at 6'7", 335. He has all the physical attributes you want for a building block along your offensive line. There's been so much buzz around the New York Giants. What direction do they want to go? At pick number 5 or potentially at pick number 7? I really believe that Ahmad Gardner could be their target at pick number 5, but if Sauce were to come off the board before then, would they pivot and go in a slightly different direction? I mean, Cross grades out as arguably one of the best offensive linemen in this entire draft, and I think when you have the opportunity to grab another building block, pair him alongside Andrew Thomas, on that offensive line, it'll give you a greater indication of exactly what you have or don't have in the case of Daniel Jones. I think we've seen Cross's stock rise considerably from his time at Mississippi State, and I really believe he can be an offensive lineman to crash that back half of the top 5. I'll take a price at 7-1 that he goes off the board early.
All right, we've gotten first picks. We've gotten top 5 value picks. Nobody's mentioned a quarterback yet. Malik Willis is likely to be the first quarterback off the board. His over-under draft position is set at 9.5 with the Seahawks drafting 9th. Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I like the under number there because I'm going to go with the Falcons, taking him at number 8, and the number there is plus 350. Look, the obvious choice starting spot is number 6 with the Carolina Panthers. We heard Todd talk about how good Charles Cross is. If he's there at 6, the Panthers better take him. Todd thinks he might go sooner than that, and that certainly makes sense. If he's there, if Ike Kwanu's there, if Evan Neal's there, you take him instead of a quarterback because the quarterback is going to look like Sam Darnold next year no matter what. So I think what you do at 8, if you're the Atlanta Falcons, if you're Arthur Blank, the owner, who just had to trade the franchise, the face of the franchise over the last 10-plus years, and Matt Ryan to Indianapolis, and you're looking for your next franchise quarterback, a Georgia guy, you go with Malik Willis. Marcus Mariota is the quarterback now. Marcus Mariota last started the football game in 2019. As I mentioned a moment ago, they don't have any offensive threats outside of Kyle Pitts, so they'll have to fix that as well. But I think if you have a quarterback who doesn't have to play right away and plays a similar style to Marcus Mariota, you have Arthur Smith, the coach who came from Tennessee and got the most out of Ryan Tannehill. It's not best case scenario. If you're Malik Willis, you probably want to go to the Patriots, but that's not going to happen. But I think it's a good place to go for Malik Willis with the expectations being relatively low, given what some of these other rookie quarterbacks may have to face in year 1.
When I look at Willis in this draft, look, I think there's 7 teams in the NFL that either have a glaring need for a quarterback or certainly can talk themselves into that choice. I think it's Carolina, Atlanta, Seattle, Houston, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. I think in this situation, I see him going to the Seahawks via trade with the Giants. I'm going to take the under. I think, Chris, you mentioned earlier, I think the over-under is at 9.5. I'm with Ryan on this one. I'm going to take the under. I think he's too shiny of an object. I think when you look at the Seahawks, it's too easy of a comparison when you look at his skill set, you look at his stature, you look at his style of play, you look at all those things and wrap it up. I think it's too convenient to look at him and say, hey, we got the next Russell Wilson. Therefore, I think he goes to the Seahawks, and I'm certainly taking the under on that 9.5 number.
You know, I'm with you, John, in terms of where I think Malik Willis could land as a member of the Seattle Seahawks, but I'm not as bullish in terms of where I think he comes off the draft board because I really believe his stock could slide a little bit and Seattle could potentially be a candidate to trade outside of the top 10 and still be able to get their guy. I mean, you look at a franchise that's clearly in transition right now after dealing Russell Wilson this offseason. They know that they're not winning anything immediately. They already have Geno Smith, who they signed to an extension. You bring in Drew Lock, you kick the tires there and see if he can keep the seat warm. And it allows Malik Willis to learn under a veteran head coach in Pete Carroll, who in my opinion isn't under immense pressure to win now, like in Carolina, where I think Matt Rule, if he were to put together another 5-12 season, he'd have to get his resume ready to look for his next potential job prospect. So while Willis offers all sorts of that potential that we saw in a player like Trey Lance last year that the 49ers became enamored with, I think it's going to take some time for him to adjust to the speed and physicality of the NFL game. You look at what Malik Willis did last season in 2 of his bigger games under the bright lights in Syracuse and Friday Night Football and against Ole Miss down there on a Saturday afternoon against an SEC opponent. I think things are going to move a lot faster. He needs to sit and learn for a season, and I think Seattle provides the perfect landing spot for that to happen.
Okay, so Malik Willis to the Seattle Seahawks, according to 2 of our experts there. We saw the line on the right side of the screen a little bit ago for the team to draft, the favorite to draft Malik Willis, and you did not see the Tennessee Titans on there. But when we talk Kenny Pickett, Todd, you are going way out on a limb here because this is something that I have not heard from anyone. Why do you like Tennessee?
You know what? Yeah, every now and again, you got to think outside the box with some of these players. And I think Kenny Pickett has been rumored to a lot of teams like the guys mentioned. Carolina at number 6, maybe to Atlanta, Seattle, any of these teams that are in need of a quarterback. But at the same time, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been mentioned for the reason that, if the Steelers were to miss on another local kid like they did with Dan Marino, they'll never be able to live it down. But if Kenny Pickett continues to slide, I think it creates an interesting situation for a team like Tennessee, who has to believe that Ryan Tannehill may not exactly be the quarterback capable of taking them to the next level, given what we saw in last year's playoff game. Now, of course, they can't do anything with Tannehill this year because of the massive cap hit that no one is going to take off their hands. And I think when you look at Kenny Pickett, so much discussion about his hand size and his ability to play in inclement weather. Well, in the AFC North, it's a bit of a problem. In a city like Seattle, it can pose a real legitimate scare in terms of the rain and wintry mix that you'll see up there. But in the AFC South, I don't think it's as big a consideration. And if he was on the board at 25, knowing that you could still get an extra year of control for the Tennessee Titans, maybe you take a flyer there. And I think the number at 15-1 is worth a small bet. Obviously not something that you're going to back up the Brinks truck and try to run to the window to bet.
I like what you're thinking there, Todd. I'm going to go a little further south than Nashville. I'm going indoors to New Orleans, which is best case scenario for 8-inch hands Kenny Pickett there. He'll be playing at least half his game indoors. The rest of the games in the division in relatively warm weather. So I think the fit there, is it perfect? Well, Kenny Pickett doesn't feel like Jameis Winston or even a quote-unquote Taysom Hill type who feels more like Malik Willis or Matt Corral. But he has a little more Drew Brees in his game than perhaps we were willing to admit. He's a little more athletic than Drew Brees. Similar arm strength if you want to get down to it. Certainly not the Hall of Fame player yet. He has yet to come into the league. He's about the same age as Drew Brees. He's going to be 24, 25 when the season begins. So that's something to keep in mind too. But I think the experience, the strides he made from 2020 to 2021, he came back last season because he was going to be a day 3 pick and he wanted to prove himself. I thought he did that. The ceiling, it's pretty low, but where you are right now, you have to feel pretty good about it if he's in the right system. And New Orleans feels like a pretty good fit. I mentioned the indoor stadium. You're in a division that's not very good. You don't know how much longer Tom Brady's going to be there. You have to figure out the Michael Thomas stuff and perhaps use an offensive lineman with the other first-round pick you have. But this team is built to go to the playoffs and built to compete now, and they have the weapons to put around Kenny Pickett as well as that good defense to be competitive, and that could potentially be a landing spot either at 16 or 19.
I'm going to be honest, fellas. I don't care about Kenny Pickett's hand size. It makes no difference to me. You look at his record as a leader at the Pittsburgh quarterback, but nevertheless, I think he comes into this draft. I don't think he has massive upside, but I also don't think he has a lot of downside. A couple months ago when we were looking at this, I thought he was going to come in somewhere between like 18, maybe 22 in the first round. I think he's come down. I think we're seeing that in the numbers. I think this is a situation at the quarterback position. I think he goes spot 31. I think he lands with the Falcons, and thank goodness they play indoors, so now we don't have to deal with Todd's hand size on Kenny Pickett. But I think he goes right at that 31 spot via trade with the Bengals. And I think, furthermore, I think this is a situation where Desmond Ridder comes off the board the following pick, which will set up a discussion here later in the show about the number of quarterbacks taken in the first round. I just think this is too safe of a bet for Atlanta. It kind of reminds me in terms of the intangibles and the way he carries himself of Matt Ryan, and everybody knows the career that Matt Ryan's had with Atlanta. So I just think this is too easy of a pick. I think they're going to hit the easy button. I think he comes off the board at 31.
Okay, Falcons 5-1 to get Kenny Pickett there. One more for you here. It's first wide receiver drafted, and Garrett Wilson is the favorite, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm going with Garrett Wilson. We know that John likes him. He just talked him up a moment ago. And I think the only, monkey wrench here could be Jameson Williams towards ACL in that national title game back in January. He's progressing along. He'll probably be ready to go maybe November. We'll see how it goes. And that feels about right. But are you getting 100% Jameson Williams as soon as he steps on the field? Probably not. That probably won't happen until next season. But you're getting a guy for 5 years either way when you take him in the first round. Just how early is a team willing to gamble on Jameson Williams, who would have been my wide receiver one had he stayed healthy? But Garrett Wilson is absolutely electric for all the reasons that we've been talking about here. And I think he's not a layup to go first overall at the wide receiver position. Teams really like Drake London as well, so that's something else to keep in mind. But I think for me, I like what the number is here, and I like what Garrett Wilson was able to do consistently week in and week out for Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. Just be smart on this bet. Go ahead and make a bet. If you're going to do it today, go on Wilson. I think it's worth looking at the lines as they develop and they unpack and unfold over the next couple of days. Jameson Williams obviously could be another one depending on the odds and how those unpack, as well as Chris Olave. If you got to lay the bet today, take Garrett Wilson plus 115, but don't be afraid to pull the trigger on Olave and Jameson Williams if the odds get correct for you over the next couple of days. Just play it safe here, not a big bet, a little bit of money, but go have some fun with it.
You know, something Ryan said that I think resonates with me here, and it'll steer me in a different direction than the Garrett Wilson, like the guys made a case for. It's Jameson Williams at plus 225. This is a price that's come down a touch from 3-1 at the top of the market. And Ryan said he would have been his number one wide receiver before his injury. We've seen players return from an ACL. It's not a death knell as far as overall speed that we've grown accustomed to in the past. And while Williams probably won't be ready for training camp or even early on in the season, would a team want to try and pass on a guy that they potentially saw as their number one game breaker? If you're picking in the top 5 or even the top 10, the reality of things are that you can be patient and wait for a player to get on the field. And rather than trying to go in the direction of Garrett Wilson, maybe a guy slips like this to the Jets at potentially number 10, and they go in the direction of Jameson Williams, who we saw at his absolute best was a game breaker and offers a slightly different element than what you've seen in some of the other top wideouts. I think his price in and of itself makes for a compelling value here at plus 225. I have him more in that 45% range to be the top wide receiver off the board. So any price north of 2-1 makes way too much sense for me to make a value bet on.
More draft props with Todd, Ryan, and John real soon. Pick Six podcast is all draft all the time right now. Find out why Will Brinson and John Breach think there's no chance the Cardinals are going to be trading Kyler Murray. He's not going anywhere, according to the fellas. But that is certainly a storyline heading into draft night that people are going to be paying attention to.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.